What lives in Earth's deepest ocean trenches? Far below the surface, beyond the reach of sunlight and nearly all exploration, lie the ocean's deepest trenches, places so remote and crushingly dark that almost nothing should survive there. And yet something does. Strange, silent forms drift through the pressure and blackness, some never seen before, others barely understood. No light, no warmth, no noise. Just flickers on a camera, soft bodies with no faces, and shapes that don't fit any rulebook. This isn't just the deep sea, it's a part of Earth we've barely touched. A place where every discovery raises more questions than answers. What lives down there? And why does it feel like we're only beginning to understand what we've found? Stay with us as we descend into the most isolated places on the planet, where the rules of life don't always apply, and the creatures hiding in the dark may be stranger than anything we've imagined. The snailfish that shouldn't exist. At the farthest edge of the ocean's known limits, where no light can penetrate and the pressure is strong enough to crush steel, scientists in 2014 lowered a deep-sea lander into the darkness of the Mariana Trench, expecting little more than drifting sediment and scavenging invertebrates. Then something appeared, slow and pale, drifting silently through the haze. It looked almost too delicate to be real, its gelatinous body nearly transparent, its fins moving gently to keep it suspended just above the trench floor. This strange creature hovered because of the camera, showing no fear, no urgency, and no trace of panic. It was a fish, but not like any fish known from shallower waters. Its body was soft and boneless, its skin lacked pigment, and its eyes, small, dark, and expressionless, seemed to look straight through the lens. What the expedition had captured was the first clear footage of a species that shouldn't exist at such depths. A snailfish, later identified and named Pseudoliparus swirei, the deepest living vertebrate ever recorded. For decades, marine biologists believed that vertebrate life couldn't survive beyond a certain depth. The crushing pressure, more than 800 times what we feel at sea level, should destroy cells, fold proteins, and collapse bones. But Pseudoliparus swirei didn't just survive in the Hadal zone. It thrived. Its adaptations tell a story of life molded by extremes. Its bones are so reduced, they're more like cartilage, giving its body the flexibility needed to resist collapsing under pressure. It moves slowly, conserving energy, gliding just above the ocean floor to feed on amphipods and other tiny scavengers that crawl across the silt. Its skin does not need color. In a world with no light, pigmentation offers no advantage. Sight is secondary. It likely relies more on vibrations, chemical cues, and water movement to detect prey. Inside its cells is the real secret: extremely high levels of a molecule called trimethylamine N-oxide, or TMAO. This compound maintains protein stability when pressure threatens to tear them apart. The deeper a fish lives, the more TMAO it needs. But TMAO comes at a cost. It makes water inside cells thicker and harder to manage. There's a limit to how much TMAO a living thing can handle. That's why some researchers believe vertebrate life can exist below about 8,200 meters, and the Mariana snailfish is living right at that limit. In 2017, another expedition returned to the trench and recorded more of them, dozens of individuals swimming calmly at depths over 8,000 meters. Some even laid eggs in artificial sediment tubes placed by researchers. That meant this species wasn't just passing through. It was reproducing in the trench itself, raising young in an environment colder than ice and darker than space. In recent years, researchers have also found related species of snailfish living in other trenches around the Pacific Rim, such as the Kermadec, Japan, and Izu-Bonin trenches, suggesting that this group of animals may be uniquely adapted to colonize some of the harshest habitats on Earth. Each population appears to be genetically distinct, evolving in isolation within the narrow confines of its trench system. These discoveries have raised new questions about how life can disperse and diversify in environments once considered completely isolated from the rest of the biosphere. Even in the deepest parts of the ocean, evolution continues to explore every available niche, reshaping familiar forms into something almost unrecognizable. But this resilience is paired with incredible fragility. When brought to the surface, the snailfish's body rapidly deteriorates. The pressure difference is too extreme. Its tissues rupture, its organs collapse, and what reaches the deck is little more than jelly. That's why nearly everything we know about Pseudoleperis swirei comes from deep-sea footage and brief glimpses during lander recovery. It is a species we can observe, but never truly touch. And that, in a way, makes it feel even more remote, an animal that evolved to fit a world we can barely access, living quietly in a trench that remains beyond our reach. It's not flashy. It doesn't glow or hunt with teeth, but it exists in a place so hostile to life that its presence challenges what we thought biology could do. Against all odds, the snailfish lives in darkness, under pressure that should destroy every cell in its body. It is soft, slow, and silent, and in that quiet, crushing cold, it has found a way to endure where no other fish can. Gigantism in the dark. Beneath the surface, far below where the last rays of sunlight fade into darkness, the ocean becomes a world of silence and pressure. At depths reaching thousands of meters, places like the Kermadec Trench, the Japan Trench, and the South Sandwich Trench, strange forms of life appear, shaped by the weight and cold of the deep. And among the most striking of these creatures are those that seem far too large for their kind. Oversized, armored, and slow-moving, they drift or crawl through the abyss with bodies that look like they belong to another era entirely. Scientists call this deep-sea phenomenon abyssal gigantism, and while its causes are still being studied, its results are hard to ignore. The Southern Ocean yielded a strange find when British researchers retrieved a massive isopod during their 1899 expedition. It was nearly the size of a dinner plate, with a segmented shell, jointed legs, and flat, lifeless eyes. It was called Bathynomus giganteus, and it was the first clear evidence that deep-sea crustaceans don't always stay small. Since then, even larger examples have been collected, some more than 50 centimeters long, crawling along the seafloor like prehistoric machines. These creatures are scavengers, often found near whale falls or decaying fish, using their strong legs and tough armor to tear through tissue that would be impossible for smaller species to handle. But isopods aren't alone. At depths beyond 4,000 meters, amphipods, normally just a few millimeters in size in shallow waters, have been found stretching more than 10 centimeters long. These deep-sea versions look like shrimp, but with more compact bodies and powerful appendages for digging into soft sediment. Some amphipods recovered from the Mariana Trench even had translucent shells and chemical traces of plastic inside their stomachs, suggesting that even in the most remote corners of the ocean, they feed on whatever the water brings, natural or not. Not all giants crawl. Some swim, and some stretch farther than most vertebrates on Earth. In 2020, during a survey in the Philippine Trench, researchers observed a siphonophore, part of the same group as jellyfish, that was estimated to be over 45 meters in length. Its thin, glowing body spiraled through the dark in a gentle coil, barely visible except for the faint pulses of bioluminescence trailing from its sides. Unlike most animals, siphonophores aren't single organisms. They're colonies made up of hundreds or thousands of tiny units called zooids, each performing a different task: feeding, moving, reproducing, while remaining physically connected. Together, they form a creature so large and alien that even experienced marine biologists struggle to describe it. Scientists believe several factors may drive this unusual size trend in the deep. In colder temperatures, biological processes slow down, and larger bodies help conserve energy more efficiently. Gigantism may also be an advantage in food-poor environments, allowing these animals to travel farther between meals or to store more nutrients after a rare feast. Pressure, too, may play a role, altering how cells grow, how oxygen moves through tissues, or how waste is processed. In a place where survival depends on doing more with less, bigger bodies may simply be more effective. And yet, despite their size, many of these creatures are slow and gentle. They aren't aggressive hunters. Instead, they move cautiously through the water or across the seafloor, using minimal energy, sometimes waiting days between feedings. Their lives are long, their movements quiet. Deep-sea gigantism doesn't mean power, it means patience. Occasionally, researchers find even stranger examples. One expedition to the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench pulled up a polychaete worm nearly 2 meters long, with iridescent bristles and a head full of sharp, jaw-like appendages. Another recorded a sea spider, technically a marine arthropod, with legs that spanned more than 50 centimeters, walking slowly across the floor with its body suspended like a fragile scaffold. These creatures look like they come from science fiction, but they're very real, and they live just beyond the edge of our reach. Each of these animals tells part of the same story. In the deepest parts of the ocean, life has taken unexpected turns. Size becomes an advantage, not a flaw. Movement slows, but endurance increases. Bodies stretch, shells thicken, and familiar forms are pushed into something strange. In the dark, under the pressure of thousands of meters of water, evolution has written its own version of what life can become, and what it creates down there is unlike anything we know above. The shrimp that sees heat. It lives thousands of meters down, where sunlight doesn't reach, and the water feels closer to boiling than cold. Near hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, a strange species of shrimp gathers in thick clusters, clinging to rocks blackened by minerals and heat. At first glance, they look like any other deep-sea crustacean, pale, eyeless, shaped by pressure and survival. But these shrimp see something most animals can't. They see heat. The species is known as Rimicaris exoculata, and it lives along the mid-Atlantic ridge, in a zone where the Earth's crust is tearing itself apart. Here, cracks in the sea floor allow superheated water rich in iron, sulfur, and other minerals to erupt into the ocean. These vents create pockets of life in an otherwise barren landscape, but the environment is dangerous. Temperatures near the vent openings can spike to over 400 degrees Celsius. One wrong move, and the shrimp are boiled alive. Yet somehow, they navigate it with precision. They have no true eyes, not the kind we're used to. Instead, they carry a primitive visual organ tucked beneath a translucent shield on their backs. Early researchers didn't think much of it. It seemed like a leftover structure, something barely functional. But a deeper study revealed something else. That organ is highly sensitive, not to visible light, but to infrared radiation. In other words, it picks up on heat. The shrimp can detect the temperature differences radiating from vent surfaces, helping them stay within a narrow range that won't kill them, but still keeps them close enough to feed. The discovery wasn't immediate. It took years of deep-sea expeditions, remote-controlled submersibles, and close examination of preserved specimens. Some of the first serious observations came in the 1982nd, when Alvin, a deep-diving submersible, captured footage of shrimp swarming around black smokers. At the time, their survival strategy was a mystery. How did they avoid cooking themselves? Why did they cluster so tightly, as if guided by something unseen? As it turned out, they were guided. The heat-sensing organ on their backs is packed with light-sensitive cells, tuned to the faintest traces of infrared radiation. It doesn't create images, not in the way human vision does, but it provides enough information for the shrimp to see gradients in temperature, to move away from lethal zones and toward those just warm enough to support the bacterial films they feed on. This heat-sensing ability gives them a sort of thermal map of their surroundings, invisible to most other creatures. They feed indirectly on the vents themselves. The superheated water supports colonies of chemosynthetic bacteria organisms that don't need sunlight to survive. Instead, they use chemicals from the vents as fuel. These bacteria coat the surfaces of rocks, and the shrimp graze on them, raking them up with tiny limbs. Some even have symbiotic bacteria living inside their mouths, providing a constant internal food supply. Their world is pitch black, except for the glow of the vents, which we can't see but they can. To the shrimp, the vent landscape is probably patterned with subtle shades of warmth, shifting and flickering like a kind of invisible fire. It's not sight as we know it, but it's something close, a way of sensing space, danger, and opportunity without needing eyes. Nothing about them seems accidental. Their curved bodies, the way they pile together in thick carpets, their tendency to form living walls across vent openings, it's all adapted to a kind of life that depends on being inches from death at all times. Step back, and it's too cold. Move too close, and it's fatal. But right in the middle, in that narrow band of survivable heat, they thrive. What's most unsettling is how alien they seem. They live without sunlight, without vision, without any of the reference points we use to make sense of the world. They navigate by heat and chemical traces. Their entire ecosystem is based on something humans can't experience directly, yet it works. It's a kind of life shaped by deep pressure, darkness, and the invisible glow of heat. No one knows how long they've lived this way. Fossils don't survive well on the seafloor, and hydrothermal vents can collapse or move without warning. But as long as there's heat and rock and minerals to feed the bacteria, the shrimp return, watching without eyes, feeding without light, seeing the one thing the deep ocean still gives off warmth. Bone-eating worms. When a whale dies, its body doesn't vanish quickly. It sinks slowly through the ocean's layers, drifting like a sunken ship toward the seafloor. What happens when it finally touches bottom, miles below the surface, is both haunting and essential. The bones become a feast. Creatures emerge from the dark: crabs, fish, snails, and worms, all drawn to the carcass like sparks to fire. But among them, one group stands out not for its size or strength, but for what it does to the dead. These are the bone-eating worms Osidax, a name that means bone devourer, and what they do is unlike anything else in the sea. The first time scientists encountered them was in 2002 during a dive off the coast of California. A remote-operated vehicle had been surveying a whale fall, expecting to find the usual scavengers. Instead, the team noticed clusters of red, flower-like tubes sprouting from the skeleton's ribs and spine. At first glance, they looked like plants or soft corals, gently swaying with the current. But they were alive worms, rooted directly into the bone, feeding from the inside out. Osidax has no eyes and no mouth. They don't chew or scrape. Instead, they grow long, branching root structures that burrow deep into the bone, breaking it down with the help of symbiotic bacteria. These bacteria release enzymes that dissolve fats and proteins locked inside the bone marrow, making the nutrients available to the worm. The process is slow and quiet. Over weeks and months, the worms hollow out the bones like rot spreading through wood, leaving behind only fragile outer shells. Most Osidax are female. The males, if you can call them that, never grow larger than a grain of rice. They live inside the female's body, sometimes dozens or even hundreds at a time fused to them, supplying sperm when needed and doing little else. It's an arrangement that might seem strange on land, but in the deep sea, where mates are rare and energy is precious, this parasitic pairing helps ensure survival. Since that first discovery, dozens of Osidax species have been found in deep waters around the world. Some prefer shallow carcasses. Others live only at depths of several thousand meters. A few specialize in certain types of bones. Scientists have placed cow bones, fish bones, and even human bones on the seafloor. And time after time, Osidax appear, as if summoned by scent alone. No one is entirely sure how they locate bones in the vastness of the ocean, but they always seem to arrive. Their life cycle is rapid, and their timing is precise. When a fresh carcass arrives, Osidax larvae swarm the area, attaching quickly to exposed bone. Those that land on bone become female. Those that land elsewhere may drift, die, or shrink into males that are taken in by females already anchored to the skeleton. Within weeks, the worms start extracting nutrients, their red fronds waving like forest canopies above the decaying remains. What's unsettling about them isn't just their appearance or the fact that they digest bone. It's how easily they spread. Even in the deepest trenches, places thought to be isolated, scientists have found Osidax thriving on bones dropped from the surface. It suggests a network of life, invisible but connected, moving silently through the dark. Bones, it turns out, are not waste in the deep sea. They are fuel. And the worms that feed on them are specialists in unlocking what would otherwise stay buried forever. A whale carcass was lowered into the Southern Ocean as part of a deep-sea study, and when researchers came back in 2013, only the bones remained. Not by sharks, not by scavenging fish, but by colonies of worms, patiently draining every bit of marrow. Only the outer shape of the skeleton remained, the inside hollowed out like driftwood. Even in the coldest, darkest parts of the world, where decay happens slowly, Osidax had done its work. The deep ocean runs on what falls from above. Carcasses, algae, waste, all of it feeds something. And in the quietest corners, where no light reaches and the pressure could crush a ship, the bone-eating worms wait. They are soft, silent, and strange, living not on flesh, but on what's left behind. In their own way, they are recyclers, keepers of the dead, turning bones into life again, one sunken skeleton at a time. Transparent predators. There are animals in the deep ocean that are almost impossible to see, not because they're hiding behind rocks or buried in sediment, but because they barely reflect light at all. Their bodies are made of a soft, jelly-like material that bends with the current and vanishes into the water around them. These creatures drift through the darkness like shadows without edges, their organs faintly visible through translucent skin, their movements so slow and quiet that you might not notice them even if they passed right in front of you. Some of them are predators, waiting in the stillness for something to get too close. Others simply collect whatever drifts their way, using traps made of light, silk-thin tendrils, or chemical lures that mimic the scent of decay. But all of them share one advantage: invisibility. Many of these animals belong to groups like comb jellies, siphonophores, and salps, gelatinous creatures that don't have bones or shells, and often don't even have clear outlines. Their bodies are mostly water, sometimes as much as 95%, and that makes them nearly weightless in the ocean's dense pressure. Some are only a few centimeters long. Others stretch for meters, coiling through the blackness like strands of glass. Because their tissues are soft and fragile, they don't leave behind skeletons or fossils. Most can't survive the trip to the surface. They tear apart before we can study them. That's why so many of these species remain unknown, unnamed, and barely understood. While exploring Monterey Bay Canyon in 2005, researchers using a submersible filmed a comb jelly with long trailing filaments and a body so clear it looked like a soap bubble. Its tentacles extended out like fishing lines, covered in sticky cells that trapped tiny plankton floating nearby. When something touched one of those threads, the whole body pulsed forward, folding its arms around the prey with a slow, squeezing motion. The creature had no brain, no eyes, and no heart, but it hunted all the same, guided by water movement, light, and chemical signals. Unlike their shallow water cousins, deep-sea comb jellies often glow. They produce light from inside their bodies using a chemical reaction known as bioluminescence. Some flash when touched, lighting up like electric wires. Others send waves of color down their sides, creating a ripple of pale blue or green that helps distract or confuse predators. A few species are even able to turn their lights off completely when threatened, fading into the dark to avoid being seen. It's not just a defense mechanism, it's a survival strategy in a world where everything is always watching for the faintest sign of life. Then there are siphonophores, colonial animals made of smaller parts, or zooids, that function as a single whole. Some siphonophores live high in the water column, while others stay closer to the seafloor. One of the largest ever recorded was spotted in 2020, off the coast of Western Australia. It was curled into a spiral more than 45 meters long, made of hundreds of glowing units connected by a single thread-like body. Each zooid had a task. Some digested food, others captured prey, and some were used for movement. Together, they acted as one of the most efficient predators in the deep sea, despite being nearly invisible to the eye. Transparency helps these predators in ways armor or speed never could. It lets them approach without being noticed. It hides their shape from prey that rely on silhouettes. In a place where light is scarce, being invisible is often more useful than being fast or strong. And unlike the sharp-toothed hunters we imagine in the deep, these animals are quiet, drifting creatures. They don't chase, they wait. Their weapons are patience, stillness, and the ability to disappear. What's eerie about them isn't just how they look or don't look, but how effective they are. They don't need size, strength, or intelligence to survive. They use their environment as a shield. The darkness hides them, the pressure protects them, and their glass-like forms let them move through the world unnoticed, untouched, and undisturbed. In many ways, these transparent predators are reminders that not all life in the deep is built for brute force. Some of it is delicate, slow, and nearly invisible. Yet it still feeds, reproduces, and thrives. In the cold, silent trenches, where everything is harder and survival comes at a cost, being unseen might be the greatest strength of all. Creatures of the brine pools. At the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, and in other trench-adjacent zones, there are places where the ocean floor gives way to something stranger, a second sea beneath the sea. From above, these pools look like shimmering mirrors set into the landscape, smooth and rippling in a way that immediately feels unnatural. But these aren't just shadows or tricks of light. They're brine pools, dense lakes of salt water that collect in depressions along the sea floor, separated from the ocean around them by nothing but weight and chemistry. The water inside a brine pool is far saltier than the seawater above. In some cases, it's 5 to 8 times more concentrated. That extra salt makes it heavier, so it sinks and settles into pits and folds in the seabed, forming stable, liquid boundaries that don't mix easily with the water above. The dividing line is so sharp that submarines have dipped their cameras beneath the surface and recorded the moment as if passing through a clear membrane. Lights bend, visibility drops. What was once normal seawater turns thick, murky, and still. Brine pools often contain more than just salt. They can hold methane, hydrogen sulfide, and other chemicals toxic to most life. The oxygen levels drop to zero. For anything that isn't adapted, entering the pool is a death sentence. Fish that swim too low sometimes become disoriented, and if they cross that line, they sink into the brine like stones. Their bodies remain there, preserved by the salt, resting at the bottom like fallen leaves on a frozen pond. And yet, even in this environment deadly, stagnant, and completely alien, some forms of life have found a way to survive. Around the edges of the brine pools, where the two worlds meet, strange communities take shape. Clumps of tube worms sprout from the sediment like pale fingers. Mussels crowd together in dense patches, anchored in place by hair-thin threads. Crabs patrol the borderlines, skirting the edge but never entering. These animals rely on chemosynthetic bacteria that feed on the toxic gases rising from the pool. Instead of using sunlight to make energy, as plants do, these microbes use chemical reactions, turning poison into fuel. And, in return, the animals that host them gain nourishment, forming the base of a food web that has nothing to do with light. In one 2012 expedition, scientists using a deep-sea robot explored a large brine pool called the Jacuzzi of Despair, named for the thick cloud of salt water and gas that rises above its surface. Anything that entered didn't come back out. Dead fish littered the rim, and the edges of the pool shimmered with bacterial mats so dense they looked like fur. Yet, amid this toxic pit, small shrimp and amphipods hovered nearby, seemingly immune to the lethal chemistry just inches away. Their ability to stay right at the edge, feeding on microbes and detritus without sinking too far, was precise, as if learned over thousands of generations. Even more fascinating are the bacteria and archaea living inside the brine itself. These microorganisms don't rely on oxygen and can survive in environments filled with hydrogen sulfide, methane, and high salinity. Some of them belong to groups scientists call extremophiles, life forms that not only survive extreme conditions, but require them. Studying these microbes gives researchers a window into early Earth, when oceans were more acidic and oxygen was rare. It also fuels speculation about what life might look like elsewhere in the universe, in places like Jupiter's moon Europa or Saturn's moon Enceladus, where briny oceans might lie hidden beneath thick layers of ice. The eerie feeling around brine pools comes not only from their toxicity, but from the organisms that manage to survive beside them. It's the idea that within the ocean, already a hostile, pressure-filled place, there are pockets of something even more extreme. Lakes that kill, yet nourish. Boundaries that separate the living from the dead by a few meters of water. And above them, silent observers, creatures that have learned not to cross, but to live forever on the edge. These are not places of chaos. They are calm, quiet, and slow. There is no crashing wave or howling current, just the steady swirl of salt and gas, the faint glow of microbial life, and the knowledge that even in the darkest depths, there are rules. Rules that cannot be broken, not by accident, not even once. Vampire squid from the oxygen void. Drifting through the deep, where oxygen vanishes and most life begins to fail, there is a creature that doesn't seem bothered by the rules. It floats in silence, not with the erratic pulsing of a panicked animal or the fast twitch of something hunting, but with the slow grace of a being built for this specific world. Its name is dramatic vampire squid, but the name doesn't quite match what it truly is. It doesn't drink blood. It doesn't attack. Instead, it lives calmly in a zone where almost nothing else can. A layer of the ocean, sometimes called the oxygen minimum zone, where conditions are so poor that most fish, and even most squid, simply can't survive. Yet here it is, gliding without effort, wrapped in a dark cloak of skin and bioluminescent lights. The vampire squid, Vampiroteuthis infernalis, was first described over 100 years ago, and even then, its name hinted at something ancient and otherworldly. Vampire squid from hell is what the Latin translates to, and while that sounds like something out of a horror film, the creature itself is more ghost than monster. It doesn't swim quickly, it doesn't chase. It floats in midwater at depths of 600 to 1,000 meters, sometimes deeper, where the water is cold, black, and nearly empty. The oxygen levels there are too low for most animals to manage. But the vampire squid's blood carries a unique version of hemocyanin, a copper-based molecule that binds oxygen more efficiently than what's found in most other marine creatures. Even when oxygen levels are barely measurable, it can still breathe. Its body is soft, almost gelatinous, and dark reddish-brown in color, blending perfectly into the shadows around it. Between its arms is a sheet of skin that looks like a cape, and when threatened, it turns itself inside out, wrapping the cape around its body and revealing rows of rubbery spikes, not true spines, but soft projections that give the illusion of defense. It doesn't attack in return. It doesn't need to. Flashing lights along its body confuse predators, and its movements are so energy efficient that it rarely needs to do anything but float. In a zone where food is scarce and energy must be carefully spent, the vampire squid has perfected a style of living that's slow, quiet, and nearly invisible. What it eats is just as strange. Unlike its cousin squids and octopuses that hunt live prey, the vampire squid survives mostly on marine snow. This is the drifting layer of tiny particles that sink from higher in the water column. Bits of plankton, fecal matter, mucus, and dead organisms. It gathers this material using long, thin filaments that extend from its body like lines from a fishing pole. These filaments are covered in sticky mucus that traps passing particles, which the squid then reels in and consumes. It is, in a way, a deep-sea recycler living off the dead and discarded remains of everything above. A 2015 study on its feeding behavior revealed that the vampire squid hardly engages in any active hunting. It doesn't chase or ambush and doesn't even bite. Its beak is small and weak, and its digestive system is adapted for processing soft material, not hard-bodied prey. It doesn't fight to survive. It drifts, it waits, and it feeds on whatever the ocean gives it. Its bioluminescence is used not just for distraction, but also for communication. Tiny light-producing organs, called photophores, dot its body, especially near the tips of its arms. It can flash these in specific patterns, possibly to startle or confuse, but also to signal, though what exactly it's saying remains unknown. Observations are rare. Capturing them on film is difficult. They tear easily, stress quickly, and are nearly impossible to keep alive in tanks. Most of what we know comes from remote-operated vehicles and fleeting moments of stillness in the deep. What's most remarkable isn't its name or its look, but where it chooses to live. The vampire squid doesn't hide from hostile conditions. It finds peace there. While other animals avoid the oxygen minimum zone, it embraces it. It doesn't need to dominate its world. It only needs to survive in it. In a layer of the ocean that's too dark, too cold, and too thin on oxygen for almost anything else, the vampire squid moves without hurry, lit by its own pale glow, a quiet presence in a space where even silence has weight. The barrel-eyed glass head. In the deep midwater layers of the ocean, between the twilight zone and the true darkness below, there drifts a fish unlike anything most people have ever seen. It moves slowly, suspended like a balloon in near still water, held in place by delicate fins that barely ripple as it hovers. At first glance, it doesn't seem unusual: small, rounded body, soft fins, and a dull, torpedo-like shape. But a closer look reveals something strange. Its head is transparent. Not just clear skin, but a dome of see-through tissue that allows the fish to look directly through its own skull. Floating behind this glass-like shield are two glowing green orbs, its eyes rotating independently inside the dome, scanning the water above with eerie precision. This fish is known as the barrel-eye Macropina microstoma, and although it was first described in 1939, almost nothing was known about its life until the early 2000s. Most of the early specimens were damaged, their heads collapsed by pressure changes during capture. It wasn't until researchers at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute used deep-sea submersibles to observe one alive in its natural habitat that the truth of its anatomy became clear. What had once seemed like small, forward-facing eyes near its mouth turned out to be something else entirely: nasal openings, not meant for vision. The real eyes were up in the dome, large, tubular, and glowing green in the dim blue light of the deep. These eyes are incredibly sensitive, adapted to pick up the faintest traces of light in a world that never sees the sunday. They can rotate inside the head, shifting direction from forward to upward without needing the body to move. Most of the time, the barrel eye keeps its gaze fixed straight above, scanning for silhouettes: jellyfish, zooplankton, or drifting prey illuminated faintly by the last echoes of surface light filtering down. If it needs to strike, the eyes roll forward as the body tilts, giving it a direct line of sight as it moves in for a capture. Its transparent head, so fragile-looking, may actually serve multiple purposes. It could help shield the sensitive eyes from stray light, protect them from the stinging tentacles of siphonophores and jellyfish, or even reduce drag as the fish floats motionless in the water. The structure is filled with fluid, and the rest of the skull is soft and rounded. Nothing in the barrel eye's design suggests speed or aggression. Instead, it's a creature built for careful observation, precise movement, and energy conservation. One of the most remarkable behaviors observed in the barrel eye is its apparent association with siphonophores, those long, glowing colonies made of multiple organisms acting as one. These gelatinous hunters drift through the deep, capturing prey with stinging cells, and the barrel eye has been seen lurking nearby, stealing food from the tentacles without getting caught. Its see-through dome may help it navigate these dangerous feeding grounds with greater precision, allowing it to track prey and threats at the same time, all without exposing itself to direct harm. Though it's only about 6 inches long, the barrel eye feels like something much larger. Its gaze is steady, its movement patient, and its body almost alien in design. It doesn't dart or flee. It floats, eyes glowing softly, dome gleaming like wet glass. There's something almost meditative in the way it holds still, suspended in place by tiny fin adjustments, its entire body devoted to the act of seeing. The world it inhabits is cold, pressurized, and still. There are no hiding places, no coral reefs or rocks to shelter behind, just open water stretching in every direction. For a fish like this, survival depends on awareness. Its strange anatomy, once thought to be a deformity or a trick of damaged specimens, turns out to be a perfect adaptation to the midwater realm. Every feature, from the fluid-filled shield to the upward rotating eyes, tells the same story. See first, move second, survive by watching. There's something deeply quiet about the barrel eye's presence. It doesn't disturb the water as it moves. It doesn't chase or fight. It waits, watching upward through its glass head at a world that barely knows it exists. And somewhere in the vast blue dark, a shadow passes above, and the barrel eye's eyes shift, silently following. Life in boiling poison. Near the edges of the ocean's tectonic plates, where the seafloor splits open and magma pushes upward from beneath the Earth's crust, something unexpected is happening. Superheated water pours out of deep vents in the rock, carrying with it a dark mix of metal, gas, and sulfur. These hydrothermal vents look like chimneys rising from the seabed, and from their mouths comes fluid so hot it would melt human skin in seconds, reaching temperatures over 400 degrees Celsius. And yet, surrounding these boiling, chemical-spewing towers, life not only exists, it flourishes. In the late 1972, during dives along the Galapagos Rift, scientists first discovered these vents by accident. They had expected to find barren terrain, lifeless rock scattered across the bottom. But what they saw instead were fields of tube worms packed together like stalks of grass, some stretching over 2 meters tall, with bright red plumes swaying gently in the dark. Surrounding them were strange clams, white crabs, and eel-pout fish, all living in a place without sunlight, under pressures that would crush a human, and next to jets of water hotter than boiling. It was the first time anyone had seen a deep-sea hydrothermal vent ecosystem. It changed everything scientists thought they knew about how life begins and where it can survive. The real challenge in these zones comes not just from the heat, but from the toxic, mineral-heavy fluids they release. The water coming out of hydrothermal vents is loaded with hydrogen sulfide, methane, and heavy metals. It's toxic to most forms of life. There's no oxygen inside the vents. There's no light. And yet, at the base of the food chain, some bacteria feed on the chemicals themselves. These microbes, called chemosynthetic bacteria, use the energy from chemical reactions, not sunlight, to make food. They form mats that coat the rocks, grow inside the tissues of other animals, and even live in floating clouds above the vents. Every other organism in the system depends on them. Among the best-known species found in this environment is the giant tube worm, Riftia pachyptilla. It has no mouth and no digestive tract. Instead, it hosts colonies of chemosynthetic bacteria inside a specialized organ called a trophosome. The worm brings in hydrogen sulfide and oxygen through its plume, delivers it to the bacteria, and in return, the bacteria produce nutrients that feed the worm. It's a perfect partnership neither could survive alone. In the pitch black, boiling dark, this strange pairing becomes the foundation for an entire ecosystem. But tube worms are just one piece of the puzzle. Around the vents, blind shrimp cluster in thick groups, their shells glowing faintly under submersible lights. Some have heat-sensing patches on their backs, allowing them to stay close to the warm water without getting too close to the lethal core. Others carry bacteria on their bodies, scraping them off to eat like portable farms. Crabs with long legs and pale bodies scuttle across the rocks, feeding on smaller animals or detritus that falls from higher up. Some species are found nowhere else in the ocean, existing only at a single vent field on one ridge. These ecosystems rise and fall quickly. A vent can last for a few years, or maybe a few decades, before the activity beneath shifts and the heat stops. When that happens, the entire community vanishes. The animals die off or move on. New vents form somewhere else, and new life begins again. It's a constant cycle: birth, death, and rebirth driven by the planet's inner heat. Even more extreme are the black smokers, vents that release dense clouds of mineral-rich water that solidify into towers as they rise. Some of these chimneys grow dozens of meters tall, forming underwater structures like cathedrals built out of metal and stone. The water inside is scalding, but right alongside, there can be cool pockets where animals gather. The difference of just a few inches can mean life or death, but the creatures living there know the boundaries. They've adapted to the margins, to the razor-thin line between energy and destruction. The surprising part isn't just that life survives here, it's how ordinary it seems once adapted. In these vents, where no light ever shines, and where the earth itself is bleeding heat into the ocean, organisms find balance. They live off poison, they grow in darkness, and they thrive where, by all logic, nothing should. The amphipods full of plastic. Far below the waves, where sunlight has never touched and the pressure could crush a steel hull, small shrimp-like creatures drift and crawl along the ocean floor. These are amphipods, tiny scavengers that live in some of the deepest parts of the world's trenches. They've been around for millions of years, quietly cleaning up what sinks from above. Dead fish, marine snow, bits of organic matter too small to see. They don't look like much, pale, soft-bodied, eyeless in some cases, but they are essential to the deep-sea ecosystem. What's unsettling is not that they exist in these isolated, crushing depths, but what's now been found inside them. Led by Dr. Alan Jameson, a research team from Newcastle University, ventured into the deep in 2017, sending traps into some of the world's most remote ocean trenches. The samples came from the Mariana Trench, the Japan Trench, the Kermadec Trench, and others all more than 7 kilometers deep. These places are difficult to reach, rarely visited, and untouched by most forms of life. But when the amphipods were brought back to the surface and analyzed under a microscope, researchers discovered something they didn't expect: plastic. Tiny fibers of synthetic material were tangled inside the animals' digestive systems, running through their guts and embedded in their tissues. The amphipods had never seen the surface. They had never been anywhere near a factory or a landfill. And yet they were full of microplastics particles less than 5 millimeters long, broken down from larger waste that drifted through the ocean. Some of the fibers were blue, some red, some transparent. Many looked like strands from clothing or fishing gear. Others may have come from packaging, ropes, or nets. All of them had traveled a long, slow path to get there, carried by currents, sinking with dead plankton, settling at last into the deepest pockets of the sea. This discovery sent a quiet shock through the scientific community. It wasn't just that pollution had reached the bottom of the ocean, it had become part of the food chain. These amphipods are eaten by larger scavengers, which in turn are eaten by predators that roam the trench floors. And while humans will never eat a Mariana Trench amphipod, the idea that plastic is now woven into the most remote layers of life says something hard to ignore. There is no untouched place left in the ocean. Some of the amphipods collected from the Mariana Trench had ingested multiple plastic fragments. Others carried only a few. But across all trench sites, the presence of synthetic materials was consistent. Even in the Kermadec Trench, which lies far from any major shipping lanes or population centers, the results were the same. The pollution had not only arrived, it had settled in. And it's not just a matter of swallowing something once. Microplastics don't digest. They sit in the gut, blocking food or damaging internal tissues. Some fibers are sharp enough to puncture cells. Others absorb toxins from the water, becoming even more dangerous once inside a living body. Over time, these particles can reduce an animal's ability to feed, grow, or reproduce. And in the deep sea, where every calorie counts and every life cycle is slow, even a small disruption can echo for generations. No one knows how long the plastic will stay there. In the cold, pressurized dark, things break down more slowly. Decay is not a fast process at the bottom of a trench. The fibers may remain inside these amphipods until they die. And when they do, the plastics will be passed on buried in sediment, eaten by scavengers, or left to drift again, ready to start the cycle over. What's haunting is that the amphipods themselves seem unchanged on the outside. They continue to move, feed, and reproduce. But inside, something unnatural has taken hold. A thread of human presence, synthetic and silent, woven into the body of a creature that lives where no human has ever stood. In these depths, where volcanoes crack the seafloor and ancient fish drift through the dark, the deepest mark left by humans isn't a footprint. It's a thread of plastic inside the gut of a tiny scavenger, unseen by almost everyone but impossible to erase. The creature with hooks instead of teeth. In the cold darkness beneath Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, where the ocean is sealed away under hundreds of meters of glacial ice, scientists expected to find little more than silence. It's a place so remote that light never reaches it, and the temperature stays just below freezing year-round. But in 2016, while drilling through the ice to study the sediment far below, a research team lowered a camera into the hole and caught something moving. At first, it was just a flicker, a blur against the still black water. But then the shape came into focus, a small, pale creature with fins, held still as it hovered in place. It wasn't the shape that caught their attention, but the mouth. Where teeth should have been, this animal had curved, barbed hooks. This was Lepidian gusakovi, a type of Antarctic cod not known for size or color or speed, but for the strange, gripping structures that fill its jaws. These hooks aren't teeth in the usual sense. They don't crush or cut. Instead, they act like claws bending inward and locking prey in place once contact is made. Each one is shaped like a tiny fishing hook, slightly translucent, arranged in rows along the upper and lower jaw. Once something soft and small gets pulled in, perhaps a shrimp, a worm, or another fish, there's no easy escape. The hooks dig in, the mouth closes, and the prey is dragged deeper, swallowed whole in the dark. Unlike the jagged jaws of predators like anglerfish or gulper eels, Lepidian doesn't have to rely on speed. It waits. Suspended in the frigid water beneath the ice shelf, it lets the ocean bring food to it. There are few currents this far below, but what does move carries plankton and detritus, sometimes larger scavengers too. The hooks are a solution shaped by the need to eat in a place where meals are rare and movement wastes precious energy. Teeth slice, hooks hold. These fish aren't large. Most of them grow less than 30 centimeters long, and they're easy to overlook in the wide blackness of their home. Their skin is a dull grayish white, with no markings to catch the eye. Their bodies are soft, slightly flattened, built more for hovering than swimming, and their eyes are small, adapted for low-light vision but not for detail. Sight doesn't help much beneath hundreds of meters of ice. What matters more is vibration, temperature, and pressure. The gentle shifts signal that something alive has passed nearby. Despite the harsh conditions, Lepidian is not alone. In this under-ice world, there are amphipods, sea stars, polycate worms, and the occasional jellyfish, all drifting through a kind of isolated, upside-down ocean. The ceiling is ice, not air. The floor, when it's visible, is mud. And in between, everything that survives must do so with minimal heat, near-zero light, and very few chances to feed. It's a habitat that forces invention, and the hook-jawed cod is one of its quietest, most unusual answers. When researchers recovered specimens for study, they found that the hooks weren't just on the visible jaws, they extended deep into the mouth and throat, forming a gauntlet that prey would have to pass through if it tried to escape. Each hook is made of keratin, similar to fingernails or scales, and they're replaced slowly over time as they wear down. Some had small bits of flesh still lodged between them. Others had broken tips, likely from previous meals that fought back. There's no chewing, no tearing, just a slow, sure draw inward until the prey stops moving. No one knows how long these fish live or how far they travel. Tracking movement under ice shelves is difficult, and most observations have come from short-term deployments. But every time a camera descends into that zone of blackness beneath Antarctica, the chances of seeing Lepidian again are high. They appear in the footage like ghosts, silent, unmoving, and strangely calm. It's not aggression that makes them disturbing. It's how still they are. How the hooks just sit in place, curved and waiting, like a trap that never has to be reset. In a world where speed, strength, and vision don't matter the way they do near the surface, creatures like this thrive by doing something simpler. They wait, they adapt, and they replace teeth with tools that don't let go. The blob with no face. Somewhere along the muddy slopes of the ocean floor, thousands of meters below the surface, lives a creature that barely looks like an animal at all. It has no eyes, no mouth, and no bones. No recognizable front or back. It moves slowly, if it can be called movement at all, spreading across the seafloor like a film of jelly. It doesn't chase prey, doesn't flee from threats, and doesn't build nests or leave tracks. It's just there, quietly, existing. For decades, no one knew exactly what it was, only that it didn't fit into any familiar category. Scientists have come to call it Xenoturbella, a genus of soft-bodied, faceless life forms that seem more like drifting tissue than living animals. First discovered off the coast of Sweden in 1915, Xenoturbella was originally mistaken for a type of flatworm. Its body was simple, just a pale, pulsing mass about a few centimeters long, with no internal organs that could easily be identified. But when researchers looked closer, something didn't line up. It didn't have the usual features of worms. It lacked a brain, it lacked a gut, and yet, somehow, it was still alive, still feeding, and still reproducing. It took nearly a century of study, including DNA analysis in the 1992nd and 2002nd, to confirm that this strange creature wasn't a worm at all, but its own branch of early animal life, separated from most known lineages by millions of years of evolution. Xenoturbella zanis doesn't come only from its limp, jelly-like shape. It's the mystery behind it that lingers. In a time when so much has been named, cataloged, and classified, it remains a kind of biological riddle. It has no defined head, no eyes to take in the world, no mouth that we can clearly see. Yet it absorbs nutrients, likely through its outer layer, or by taking in food particles from the sediment it glides across. Some species have been found with traces of clam DNA in their bodies, suggesting they feed on bivalves or their larvae. Others may rely on bacteria. But the truth is, we still don't fully know. When deep-sea exploration teams come across one, often by accident, they don't see a creature that stirs or reacts. The blob just lies there, featureless and soft, slowly rippling as the water moves around it. Its surface has a faint texture, and its body can contract or stretch slightly, but there's no clear behavior to observe. It seems indifferent to light, to current, to other animals. And maybe that's why it has survived for so long. By being so simple, it has nothing to lose. Even more remarkable is the possibility that this simplicity dates back to ancient evolutionary roots. Genetic studies suggest that Xenoturbella could represent a very primitive stage in animal evolution, one of the earliest branches after multicellular life first appeared. That would make it not just a mystery of the deep, but a living fossil of sorts. A glimpse into what life might have looked like hundreds of millions of years ago, before the explosion of complex forms, skeletons, and nervous systems. If that's true, then this faceless blob isn't just strange, it's fundamental. A surviving chapter from a time before eyes, before brains, before the kind of life we're used to seeing. New forms of Xenoturbella were found in the deep Pacific in 2016, some larger than any previously known, measuring up to 20 centimeters. But the silence remained. No eyes, no sound, no answers. They drift across the sediment in the dark like bits of loose tissue, barely registering on sonar or camera feeds. And yet, when scientists retrieve them, the same questions remained. How do they reproduce? How do they sense their surroundings? What kind of neural system, if any, do they possess? Each discovery only deepens the uncertainty. For every clue found in their genome, there's a new structural oddity that doesn't quite fit. They have no hard parts, they don't fossilize, and unless caught in a sample or captured in a rare video, they leave behind almost nothing to study. They are a presence more than a figure, something that is simply there, unchanged, unbothered, and unreadable. Down where the strangest creatures flash and bite, Xenoturbella doesn't glow, doesn't snap, doesn't even look back. It doesn't lure, attack, or flee. It doesn't watch or listen. It simply moves or lies still, somewhere far below, without a face, without a name we truly understand, and with a past that might be older than almost anything else we've ever found alive. Unknown but recorded. Far beneath the waves, where sunlight cannot reach and pressure grows heavier with every meter, our machines have captured things we still don't understand. No names, no classifications. Just brief recordings, blurry shapes drifting across a screen, silent movements in the dark, forms that don't match anything we've cataloged before. These encounters are often short, a few seconds, sometimes less. But they stay with the people who witness them, because what was recorded shouldn't exist, or at the very least, doesn't match anything we've seen in the fossil record, the field guides, or the deep-sea databases. While navigating the depths of the Java Trench in 2017, researchers using a remotely operated vehicle encountered something they couldn't explain. It was large, several meters long, but gelatinous, loose, constantly changing shape as it moved. It had no visible limbs, no bones, no shell or hard edge, just a series of translucent folds twisting in the current like cloth underwater. The team behind the camera paused the vehicle, trying to adjust focus, but the creature didn't respond. It drifted upward and vanished. The footage was saved, reviewed, and shared. Still, no one could identify it. Some speculated it might be a massive deep-sea jellyfish. Others suggested an unknown siphonophore or a completely new organism, but it didn't behave like any of them. No bioluminescence, no pulse, no clear structure, just movement and presence. Similar reports have come from expeditions around the Mariana Trench and the Gulf of Mexico. In some cases, they're just glimpses of shadow crossing the background, while the ROV focuses on something else. In one instance, a spindly, many-legged creature crawled across the frame of a camera during a dive near the Unidentified Trench. It didn't match any crustacean or arthropod on record. Its limbs were too thin, its body too angular, and its motion too slow. Researchers replayed the footage again and again, adjusting the contrast and brightness, but still couldn't pin it down. There were no matching entries in any marine biology archive. These sightings are sometimes dismissed as errors, distortions caused by lighting, debris, or camera lag, but others are harder to explain. In 2021, a Japanese research team operating in the Izu-Ogasawara Trench filmed a long serpentine shape coiled around a thermal vent. It wasn't eel-like. It didn't swim. It clung. Its body was lined with flaring structures, possibly gills, possibly something else, and it stayed motionless for nearly 10 minutes before slipping out of view. The clip was quietly archived, and though a few still images were shared in conferences, no definitive answers followed. Part of the reason these sightings remain unidentified is simple. We don't have enough footage. Many RAWs only record in one direction at a time. The cameras are built for durability, not high resolution, and the lighting in the deep sea distorts distance and size. In most cases, the animal is already gone before the team realizes what they've seen. Sometimes it appears only once in hundreds of hours of recording. Sometimes it never appears again. The deep ocean doesn't offer second chances. Even so, each clip adds to the growing sense that we've only encountered a sliver of the deep's full reality. Scientists estimate that over 90% of deep-sea species remain undescribed. And if that's true, then our cameras aren't just capturing strange animals, they're catching glimpses of an entirely unseen world, one that keeps slipping just out of reach. The unease doesn't come from the creatures alone, but from the environment they appear in. They appear in places we've barely explored, in regions where few, if any, humans have looked before. There's no warning, no explanation, just the brief appearance of something we weren't expecting, something that doesn't belong on any chart or diagram, yet moves like it's always been there. We often imagine the deep ocean as a silent, slow-moving space filled with well-defined monsters, anglerfish, giant squid, ancient sharks. But these brief sightings suggest something less familiar. Not terrifying exactly, but alien. Slow forms without structure, movements without a clear purpose, and every once in a while, something entirely new passes across the edge of the lens, as if reminding us that the ocean doesn't just hide its past, it hides its present too. In the end, we label them the only way we can, unknown but recorded, and until we meet them again, that's all they'll remain.